The first time I saw the glitch, I thought I was losing my mind. Just a flicker in the data stream, a momentary hiccup in the otherwise flawless government birth records that scrolled across my screen. I'd been staring at these numbers for months now, ever since Teo. Ever since they told me he died of complications. The pattern shouldn't exist. That's what kept me up at night, what drove me to hack deeper into the system than any sane data analyst would ever go. But sanity left me the day they handed me an empty memory cube instead of my son. "I'm sorry for your loss, Mr. Hayashi," the hospital administrator had said, her voice as synthetic as the recycled air. "Sometimes these things happen. But they don't. Not with modern medicine. Not with genetic screening and prenatal nanobots and artificial wombs as backup. Babies don't just die anymore. Unless they aren't dying at all." My apartment, a glorified storage unit with windows, was plastered with displays showing birth rate statistics for New Singapore. 5 years of data, projected in harsh blue light that gave my skin the pallor of those bodies they pull from the East Pacific waste vortex. I took another swig of synthetic whiskey, the real stuff costs more than my monthly rent, and tried to focus on the numbers swimming before my eyes. "Come on, show me," I muttered, brushing my fingers through the holographic display. "Where did you go, Teo?" The system pinged. Another record appeared, this one from a hospital in District 9. Another complication. Another dead baby who never made it home. That made 157 in the past 6 months. In a city with flawless genetic screening and a 99.98% live birth success rate. Aren't you supposed to be at work? I nearly jumped out of my skin. My ex-wife, Lena, stood in the doorway, arms crossed, looking at my projection-covered walls with that familiar mixture of pity and disgust. "I took personal days," I said, minimizing screens with a flick of my wrist. "Again? Ren, it's been 7 months." Her voice softened as she stepped into the chaos of my investigation. The grief counselor said, "I don't need another syntherapist telling me how to feel." I turned away, focusing on reorganizing data that didn't need reorganizing. Lena sighed. I could feel her eyes on my back, on the unwashed clothes and the 3-day stubble and the food containers piling up in the corner. "You need to let him go," she said. "That's the problem," I replied, spinning to face her. "I don't think there's anything to let go of." She froze. "What's that supposed to mean?" I gestured to the walls. "All these babies, all these complications. They happen in clusters, Lena. Statistical anomalies. And then afterward? No genetic storage. No recorded cremations. No DNA records preserved. You've been drinking. Look." I pulled up one display. "This is the medical waste disposal record from Teo's hospital for the week he was born. There's nothing, Lena. No biological waste matching his profile. Nothing." Her expression hardened. "Stop this. Please." She placed a small package on my cluttered kitchen counter. "I brought you some real food. Try to eat something besides those nutrient blocks." Before I could respond, she was gone, the door hissing shut behind her. I stared at the spot where she had stood, feeling the familiar weight of her disappointment. My comm buzzed. "Unknown sender. You're looking in the right place, but with the wrong tools. The babies weren't killed. They were taken. Vector Club. Midnight. Come alone." I read the message 3 times, my heart hammering against my ribs. I'd been careful, using private servers and bouncing my searches through anonymizers. Someone had been watching me. Or maybe someone was watching everyone who lost a child. The Vector Club was in the Undercity, far beneath the gleaming skyscrapers and aerial gardens of New Singapore proper. The kind of place where social credit scores didn't matter and the government surveillance net had convenient blind spots, if you could pay for them. I spent the next few hours preparing, copying my research to an untraceable data stick and changing into clothes that wouldn't immediately mark me as an upper city professional. The less attention I attracted down there, the better. The club's entrance was disguised as a defunct maglev repair station. I passed a palm-sized credit transfer to the heavily augmented bouncer, who gave me a once-over with cybernetic eyes that glowed faintly orange. "First-timer," he said. "Not a question. Looking for information." He grunted, stepping aside to reveal a narrow staircase descending into pulsing darkness. "Aren't we all?" The Vector Club was a sensory assault. Throbbing basslines that resonated in your molars, holographic dancers that flickered between human and abstract art, the mingled sense of synthetic drugs and real sweat. I felt painfully out of place, a lab rat thrown into a snake pit. "You look lost." A woman materialized beside me, her features shifting subtly every few seconds as her facial projection cycled through different appearances. A privacy measure common in the Undercity. "I got a message," I said. About the babies." Her expression, currently that of a narrow-faced woman with violet eyes, hardened. She grabbed my wrist, fingers surprisingly strong. "Not here." She pulled me through the crowd, past booths where patrons sat slack-jawed in VR trances and around a bar where the drinks glowed unnatural colors. We reached a door marked "Storage," which slid open at her approach. Inside was a small room lined with screens similar to my apartment setup. 3 people looked up as we entered. An older man with extensive facial scarring, a young person with a completely shaved head and iridescent skin implants, and another whose features were hidden behind an old-fashioned privacy mask. "This him?" the scarred man asked. The woman nodded. "Says he got our message." "Who are you people?" I asked, suddenly aware of how vulnerable I was, alone in a room with 4 strangers in the Undercity. "We call ourselves the Watchers," the scarred man said. "I'm Dex." "That's Ren." He nodded toward the young person with the shaved head. "Our silent friend goes by Cypher." The masked individual nodded. "And you've met Nova." He gestured to my guide. "I'm Ren," I said. "Ren Hayashi." "We know who you are," Ren said, their voice surprisingly melodic. "Analyst for the Ministry of Population Control. Lost a son 7 months ago. Been digging into places you shouldn't ever since. How do you?" "Because we've been doing the same thing for years," Nova interrupted, her projection settling on a permanent appearance, sharp features, short white hair, eyes that remained violet. "Some of us lost children too. Others noticed the pattern. We found each other." Dex tapped a screen, bringing up a map dotted with glowing points. "Every one of these marks is a complication. A baby reported dead but with no biological waste disposal record. No DNA storage. Nothing. It was my research, but expanded, not just New Singapore but cities across the Pacific Rim. Hundreds of points. Thousands. What are they doing with them?" I asked, my mouth dry. "That's what we've been trying to find out," Cypher said, voice distorted through the mask. "We have theories." "Government breeding program," Ren suggested. "Creating perfect citizens." "Organ farming," Nova added grimly. "Black market for baby parts to extend the lives of the ultra-rich." "Or something worse," Dex said. "Something we can't even imagine." My head was spinning. But why? Why take babies? Why not just create them in labs? Dex finished. "They do that too. But there's something special about naturally conceived children. Something in their genetic diversity that artificial wombs haven't replicated." I thought of Teo, of the choice Lena and I made to conceive naturally despite the additional costs and risks. How proud we'd been to buck the trend of designer babies. "We've tracked shipments," Nova continued. "Specialized containment units leaving hospitals after recorded infant deaths. They go to a facility outside the city. The nursery, Ren added with obvious disgust. That's what they call it in their secured communications. We need someone who can access the main population database, Cypher said. Someone like you. I hesitated. That's high-level security. I'd lose my job. Maybe worse. Your son was taken, Dex said flatly. Don't you want to know why? My son. The words hit me like a physical blow. Not my dead son. My taken son. Show me everything you have, I said. The next 4 hours were a crash course in conspiracy. The Watchers had been collecting evidence for years, surveillance footage of unmarked medical transports, encrypted communications they'd managed to intercept, testimonies from maintenance workers who glimpsed things they shouldn't have in hospital sub-basements. We need access to the sealed birth records, Nova explained. The real ones, not the doctored versions released to the public. With that, we can prove the pattern and possibly track where the children are taken. And then what? I asked. Then we go get them, Dex said simply. It seemed impossible. Crazy. And yet the evidence before me was compelling. The statistical anomalies. The missing waste disposal records. The encrypted transports. I'll need time, I said finally. To figure out how to access those records without getting caught. Time is something these children don't have, Cypher said ominously. What do you mean? The four exchanged glances. We intercepted partial communications, Nova explained. Something's happening soon. Something called the Harvest Protocol. What is that? We don't know exactly, Dex admitted. But it's scheduled to begin next week. As if on cue, every screen in the room flashed with an incoming alert. Nova rushed to a terminal, fingers flying over the interface. They're moving a shipment tonight, she said, voice tight. 3 newborns from Central Hospital. That's where Teo was born, I whispered. Another alert flashed. Nova's face went pale beneath her projection. Facial recognition just flagged something from the hospital's security feed. She tapped the screen, and a grainy image appeared, a nurse carrying a small bundle toward a service elevator. Can you enhance? Ren asked, leaning forward. Nova manipulated the image, zooming in on the bundle. A tiny face came into focus, eyes closed, wispy dark hair, a small birthmark above the right eyebrow. A birthmark shaped like a crescent moon. Just like Teo's. That's not possible, I breathed. This is from today. Nova nodded, her expression grim. According to the timestamp. But that looks like, it looks exactly like. Your son, Dex finished for me. The room seemed to tilt around me. My son is dead. Or, Ren said quietly, he was never born at all. I stared at the image, at the tiny face that looked so much like the child I'd held for only a few precious minutes before they took him away. What are you saying? I managed. We think they're growing them, Cypher said. Cloning them, perhaps. The same genetic patterns, over and over. But why? That, Nova said, is what we're going to find out tonight. My mind raced with impossible possibilities. Not just taken, but replicated. Cloned. My son, or someone with his exact genetic makeup. Was alive, being transported right now. I'm coming with you, I said, surprising myself with the steadiness in my voice. Dex nodded. We were hoping you'd say that. As the Watchers gathered equipment, weapons disguised as common tools, scramblers for security systems, medical emergency overrides, I found myself staring at the image of the baby with Teo's birthmark. 7 months of grief had hollowed me out, left me a shell of who I'd been. Now, that hollow space filled with something new. Not hope, hope was too gentle a word for the burning in my chest. Determination. Rage. And beneath it all, a terrible fear of what we might find. Ready? Nova asked, handing me a small device that would mask my biosignatures from security scans. I nodded, tearing my eyes away from the screen. Let's find out what happened to our children. The transport vehicle moved silently through the night, its electric engine barely a whisper against the backdrop of New Singapore's perpetual hum. We followed in Dex's ancient ground car, a relic that predated modern tracking systems. Offline tech, he'd explained when I'd raised an eyebrow at the manual controls. Can't hack what isn't connected. Nova sat beside him, monitoring the transport's route through a cobbled-together tracking system. Ren and Sci-Fi were in the back with me, methodically checking equipment. Here, Ren said, handing me a small device that looked like a standard medical scanner. Neural disruptor. Non-lethal, but it'll drop anyone for about 5 minutes. Point and click. I took it gingerly. I've never used a weapon before. It's not a weapon, Sci-Fi corrected, voice still distorted through their mask. It's a tool. Like everything else we use. I wasn't convinced by the semantic difference, but I slipped it into my pocket anyway. The transport took an unexpected turn, veering away from the main highway toward the coastal district. They're heading for the old C-Gen facility, Nova announced, surprise evident in her voice. That doesn't match previous patterns. C-Gen? I asked. Abandoned ocean thermal energy plant, Dex explained, taking a sharp turn to keep pace. Supposedly decommissioned 15 years ago when fusion became cheaper. Supposedly. Let's just say the power grid still shows it drawing significant energy, Ren said. For a decommissioned facility. The coastal district was largely automated now, robotic loading docks, drone-operated shipping containers, and very few human witnesses. Perfect for clandestine operations. We parked half a kilometer from where the transport had stopped, a massive cylindrical structure rising from the water's edge, covered in faded blue paint and warning signs. How do we get in? I asked as we gathered at the edge of the dock, watching distant figures unload something from the transport into a service entrance. The old-fashioned way, Nova replied, pulling up schematics on her portable display. Maintenance tunnels. Every facility this size has them, and they're never as well monitored as the main entrances. She led us to what looked like an ordinary utility box on the perimeter fence. A few deft manipulations later, and a section of ground slid away, revealing a narrow passage downward. Hurry, she whispered. Sensor loop won't last long. One by one, we dropped into darkness. The tunnel smelled of salt water and rust, illuminated only by the dim glow of our personal devices. Water dripped somewhere in the distance, echoing ominously. This way, Nova murmured, consulting her schematic. The main facility should be through here. We moved silently, Dex in the lead with some kind of scanner that swept for security measures. Twice we had to freeze as automated patrols passed nearby, their mechanical whirs sending chills down my spine. Finally, we reached a maintenance hatch. Sci-Fi moved forward, attaching small devices to the electronic lock. Old systems, they said, the first hint of emotion, satisfaction, in their distorted voice. Easy to fool. The hatch clicked open, and we slipped inside, finding ourselves in a dimly lit corridor lined with pipes and conduits. Now what? I whispered. We split up, Dex said. Cover more ground. Find the babies, document everything, then get out. Clean and simple. Nothing about this felt clean or simple, but I nodded anyway. Ren, you're with me, Nova said. Ren and Sci-Fi take the upper levels. Dex, you run interference from here. Dex settled himself by a data port, connecting his equipment. I'll keep security distracted. You've got 30 minutes before I have to cycle the systems again. Nova and I moved deeper into the facility, following what her schematic indicated was a path toward the central core. The architecture changed as we progressed, utilitarian maintenance tunnels giving way to pristine white corridors that wouldn't have looked out of place in a high-end medical facility. This doesn't look abandoned, I murmured. That's because it never was, Nova replied grimly. We passed laboratories with glass walls, each containing equipment I vaguely recognized from hospital settings, but modified in ways I couldn't quite understand. Everything was automated, robotic arms performing tests on samples, data flowing across screens too fast to read. Look. Nova pointed to a symbol recurring throughout the facility, a stylized double helix wrapped around what looked like a tree. Corporate logo. Geneva Biotech. The name rang a faint bell. They make medical nanotech, don't they? Among other things. They're also one of the primary contractors for the government's Population Optimization Initiative. Before I could ask what that meant, a sound stopped us in our tracks, a soft, collective whimper that raised the hair on my arms. Crying. Baby crying. Not one baby. Dozens. We followed the sound to a massive circular chamber. Through a small observation window, I saw something that defied comprehension. Rows upon rows of transparent incubation pods, each containing an infant. Hundreds of them, arranged in concentric circles around a central pillar that pulsed with blue light. Robotic arms moved methodically between the pods, taking readings, adjusting nutrients, occasionally removing a baby for some procedure before returning it. What the hell? I breathed. Nova was already documenting everything, her eyes wide behind her portable scanner. It's a nursery. An actual nursery. I scanned the pods frantically, looking for a face I recognized, for that crescent birthmark. Why? What are they doing with them? Let's find out. Nova hacked the door panel, and we slipped inside, staying close to the wall, hidden behind equipment. Up close, the scene was even more surreal. Each pod was labeled with a code and what appeared to be a date. The babies weren't crying anymore, the sound had been coming from elsewhere, but some were awake, tiny fists waving at nothing. Nova accessed a terminal, her fingers flying over the interface. They're all catalogued. Genetic markers, brain development metrics, something called psionic resonance potential. What does that mean? She shook her head. I'm not sure, but, she stopped suddenly, staring at the screen. There's another chamber. Below this one. That's where they're taking the ones that meet certain criteria. A mechanical voice suddenly echoed through the chamber, harvest protocol initiated. Phase 2 subjects prepared for integration. The robotic arms increased their pace, selecting specific pods and moving them toward a large platform in the floor that began to descend. We need to see what's down there, I said, already moving toward the platform. Ren, wait. Nova hissed, but I couldn't wait. Not when one of those pods might contain my son, or whatever had been grown from his genetic material. I slipped behind a large piece of equipment, waiting until the platform was loaded with selected pods, then made a dash for it just as it began to descend again. Nova cursed, then sprinted after me, barely making it onto the platform before it dropped below floor level. We descended into a chamber that made the nursery above seem mundane by comparison. This room was dominated by what I can only describe as a machine-organic hybrid, a massive structure of metal and pulsing tissue that reached from floor to ceiling. Pods containing babies were being attached to it by robotic appendages, their tiny bodies suddenly illuminated from within by the same blue light that coursed through the structure. What is that thing? I whispered. Nova's face had gone pale. It's a neural network. A literal one. They're connecting the babies to it. As we watched in horror, the babies whose pods had been attached began to spasm slightly, their brainwaves displayed on nearby monitors spiking in perfect synchronicity. Why would they? Quantum computing, came a voice from behind us. Using the ultimate parallel processors, developing human brains. We spun to find ourselves facing a woman in a white lab coat, flanked by security drones. Her expression was calm, clinical, as if she'd just explained a mundane procedure. Dr. Evers, Nova said, recognition in her voice. Head of Neurological Research at Geneva. And you're the troublesome group that's been poking around our operations, Dr. Evers replied. I must say, you've been persistent. She glanced at me. Especially you, Mr. Hayashi. Though I suppose parental attachment, even to a genetic source sample, is a powerful motivator. Where is my son? I demanded. Your son. She raised an eyebrow. Your biological material contributed to several of our specimens, if that's what you mean. But they're not children, Mr. Hayashi. They're components. The casual cruelty of her words struck me like a physical blow. Components? For the most advanced computational system ever created, she said, gesturing to the pulsing structure. Traditional quantum computers have limitations. But the human brain, particularly the developing brain, exists in a constant state of quantum possibility. By networking them together, we've created a system that can solve problems no silicon-based computer could approach. You're using babies as processors. Nova's voice shook with rage. These aren't babies, Dr. Evers corrected. They're cultivated neural tissue with optimized genetic profiles. The deaths are simply a means of obtaining diverse genetic material without raising questions. They're human beings, I said. They're tools, she countered. Tools that will help solve humanity's greatest challenges. Climate modeling, pandemic prediction, resource optimization, this system will save billions of lives. By sacrificing thousands? Nova asked. A necessary calculation. Dr. Evers nodded to the security drones. Take them to processing. Their genetic material may be useful. Before the drones could move, the lights flickered, then went out completely, plunging the chamber into darkness except for the eerie blue glow of the neural structure. Dex's voice came through our communicators, got their systems. Running the blind protocol now. Get out of there. Taking advantage of the confusion, Nova activated her neural disruptor, sending the doctor crumpling to the floor. The drones, momentarily disconnected from the security network, hovered uncertainly. Come on. Nova grabbed my arm, pulling me toward an emergency exit indicated on her schematic. But I pulled away. We can't leave them like this. I rushed to the closest pod attached to the neural network. Inside was a baby, not Teo, not with his features, but someone's child nonetheless. Its tiny face was contorted in what looked unsettlingly like pain. How do we disconnect them? I asked frantically. Nova joined me, examining the connection points. There must be a release mechanism. A new alarm began to sound, a pulsing wail that made my teeth ache. System integrity breach, announced an automated voice. Neural network destabilizing. Commencing emergency protocols. The blue light flowing through the structure began to pulse erratically. On the monitors, the synchronicity of the connected brains was breaking down. What's happening? I shouted over the alarm. The network's failing. Nova replied. Without the security protocols, the system can't maintain the neural connections. The pods began to detach automatically, the robotic arms removing them from the structure and placing them on mobile platforms. Where are they taking them? I asked. Evacuation protocol, Nova said, reading a flashing message on a nearby terminal. They're moving the viable components to a secondary facility. I couldn't let that happen. Not now that I knew the truth. We have to stop them. Nova nodded grimly. Dex. Can you lock down the transport bay? Working on it, came the strained reply. But I'm losing control of the systems. Whatever you're going to do, do it fast. I spotted a control station near the center of the room. Racing to it, I began searching for anything that might help. Here. I called to Nova. Transport override. Together, we managed to redirect the automated platforms. Not to the evacuation point, but to the main laboratory upstairs where Ren and Sci-Fi were supposed to be. Ren. Sci-Fi. Nova called over the comm, "We're sending you the babies. Get them out." "All of them," came Ren's incredulous reply. "There must be hundreds." "As many as you can," I said. "Priority to the ones that were connected to the network." While Nova coordinated the evacuation, I noticed Dr. Evers beginning to stir. I approached her cautiously. "Why?" I asked, genuinely needing to understand. "How could you do this?" She looked up at me, still dazed from the neural disruptor. "Do you have any idea what problems we're solving? The famines we've prevented? The diseases we've cured? The climate disasters we've mitigated? At what cost?" "Progress always has a cost, Mr. Hayashi. These specimens were created for this purpose." "They're children," I insisted. "They're the future," she countered. "Our future. Humanity's future." A distant explosion rocked the facility. "Self-destruct initiated," the automated voice announced. "All personnel evacuate immediately." Dr. Evers laughed bitterly. "Failsafe protocol. They're going to destroy the evidence. And us with it." Nova grabbed my arm. "We need to go. Now." I hesitated, looking at the remaining pods being transported upward. Is my son among them?" "Does it matter?" she asked. "They're all someone's children." She was right. Whether my genetic material had been used to create one of these babies or 100, they were all victims of the same horrific system. We raced for the exit as the facility began to shake around us. Through the comms, I could hear the chaos as Ren, Sci-Fi, and Dex tried to coordinate the rescue of as many infants as possible. "Transport secured," Dex reported. "But we can't take them all. An impossible choice." I thought of Teo, the son I'd held so briefly, or perhaps had never held at all. I thought of Lena, and the grief that had torn us apart. I thought of all the other parents like us, mourning children who had been stolen rather than lost. Take the ones who were connected to the network first, I decided. They've suffered enough. We reached the upper levels to find Ren and Sci-Fi loading pods into the transport vehicle we'd followed, now repurposed for a very different cargo. Dozens of tiny faces, some sleeping, some waking confused in their transparent chambers. "We've got room for maybe 50, Ren said grimly. "There are over 300 in total." Another explosion, closer this time. The facility was coming apart around us. "We need to call for help," I said suddenly. "Official help." "Are you crazy?" Dex demanded. "The government is part of this." "Not all of it," I insisted. "This is too big, too horrific. There must be people who don't know, who wouldn't approve if they did." I pulled out my official ministry credentials and activated the emergency beacon, a direct line to Population Control Emergency Services. "This is Analyst Ren Hayashi," I said into the comm, authorization code Lima 735 Delta. "I'm reporting a mass kidnapping and human experimentation event at the old C-Gen facility. Hundreds of infants in danger. Requesting immediate medical evacuation and security response." "They'll arrest us all," Sci-Fi warned. "Maybe," I agreed. "But the babies will live." Within minutes, the night sky filled with the sound of approaching emergency vehicles, medical transports, security drones, news outlets alerted by the unusual activity. As the facility continued to crumble, we made a decision. Ren and Sci-Fi would take our transport with as many babies as it could hold, disappearing into the Undercity where the Watchers had connections with medical professionals who could care for them. Dex, Nova, and I would stay, face the authorities, and tell our story. "Find them homes," I told Ren as they prepared to leave. "Real homes." "We will," they promised. As the official responders arrived, I stood among the chaos, the collapsing facility, the rescued infants, the gathering media drones already broadcasting the scene worldwide, and felt something I hadn't experienced since the day they told me Teo had died. Purpose. "Mr. Hayashi," said an official in a population ministry uniform, approaching cautiously. "What's happening here?" I took a deep breath. "The truth," I said. Finally, the truth. 3 months later, I sat in a small room in the new Singapore Memorial Children's Center, watching as Lena held a baby boy with a crescent-shaped birthmark above his right eyebrow. "Are you sure?" she asked for perhaps the 100th time. "Is he really?" "Genetically, yes," I said softly. "The DNA tests confirmed it. He was created from our genetic material, just like the others." The scandal had rocked the world, the nursery operation, they called it. A black-budget program using supposedly deceased infants as components in an organic quantum computing network. Some officials had known. Many hadn't. The investigations were ongoing, the trials just beginning. Geneva Biotech was finished, its executives facing charges of crimes against humanity. Dr. Evers had disappeared during the chaos of that night, rumored to have escaped to one of the corporate-controlled orbital platforms where Earth laws held less sway. The hardest part had been explaining to the parents, thousands of them across dozens of cities, that their dead children had never actually existed as they imagined them. They were genetic constructs, grown in artificial wombs, tagged with familial DNA to ensure compatibility with the neural network. Some parents, like Lena and me, had chosen to adopt the children created from their genetic material. Others couldn't face the reminder of their grief, or the moral complexity of the situation. For them, the Children's Center found new homes with thoroughly vetted families. The baby in Lena's arms, legally our son now, though not the Teo we had originally expected, yawned and stretched tiny fingers toward her face. "What do we call him?" she asked. "I don't think I can call him Teo." I understood. That name belonged to a different child, one who had existed only in our hopes and brief memories. "How about Kai?" I suggested. "It means recovery or restoration in the old language." She smiled, the first genuine smile I'd seen from her in over a year. "Kai," she repeated, testing the name. "I like it." Outside the center's windows, I could see the city continuing its rhythms, but with subtle differences. The exposure of the nursery operation had triggered a societal reckoning. About technology, about progress, about what lines should never be crossed, no matter the potential benefits. My comm buzzed with a message from Nova, "Meeting tonight." New information. The network wasn't the endgame. I sighed. There would always be more to uncover, more battles to fight. But for now, watching Lena and Kai together, I allowed myself to feel something that had been foreign to me for too long. Not happiness, exactly, the wounds were still too fresh, the losses too profound. But possibility. The possibility of healing. The possibility of justice. The possibility of a future.